Okay, hello and welcome to our next lesson in this topic on adaptation and competition. So in previous lessons we've looked at what competition is, we've looked at what adaptation is. Today we need to really focus and hone in on different examples of adaptations for organisms. So by the end of today's lesson you should be able to recall what an adaptation is. You should already be able to do that. You should be able to name some ways in which polar bears are adapted to live in the North Pole, and you should be able to evaluate how some organisms are adapted to live in their environment. So over my years of teaching, I've come to realise that examiners, be it at GCSE, be it at A level, or be it lower down in the school, can ask you about any organism on Earth. They can ask you about any organism that they can think of. Now, obviously, I don't have enough time in a year or even 5 years to go over every single organism that you could be asked about in your exam. Therefore, today, I want us to just go over some examples of how organisms are adapted. So what we're going to do is, in this PowerPoint, we've got lots of different organisms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put each one up on the screen. I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and I'm going to ask you to then write down in your books different ways that you think or can find how this organism is adapted to live where it lives. Okay? Now, you don't have to just use the notes in your book. You can use the internet. You can go on to textbooks. You can do whatever you like to find the answers. I'll then go over some of them on the screen. Okay? So before we start, if we go back over to this one. Before we start, we've said in previous lessons that an adaptation is a characteristic that an organism has to allow it to compete for resources. Okay? So what I would like you to do is I would like you to think about a polar bear. Okay? So the environment that a polar bear lives in, so we can say polar bears live in cold, snowy areas with little food. Seeing what I've told you on the screen, so seeing that I've told you that polar bears live in very cold, snowy areas with little food, I want you to think and write down in your book every adaptation you can think of that help it to do that. Help it to live, help it to compete for resources. So pause the video now, write it down in your books, use the internet, use textbooks to help you, have a different coloured pen to hand because we're going to go over some that you can mark and add to it. So pause the video now. So, you should have paused the video, you should have used all the resources that you have to hand to write down some adaptations of polar bears. So there's two types or two groups of adaptations that we can write down for the polar bear. We've got adaptations to survive the cold, and we've got adaptations that allow it to hunt prey. So adaptations that allow it to be a predator. and we're going to go over some of these. Okay, so we'll go over the ones for cold first. So it has a thick fur to keep warm. It has thick blubber to keep warm. Now, blubber is a special type of fat. It's not good enough to say the polar bear's fat so it stays warm. You need to use the word blubber. It has small ears to reduce heat loss. We can also say that it has this large, chunky body to keep heat in. So it has a high volume to surface area ratio. High volume to surface area ratio. It also has wide pores to stop it sinking in snow. These are all adaptations to allow the polar bear to survive in cold conditions. Let's have a think now about adaptations that allow it to be a predator. So it has binocular vision, which we spoke about in one of the last lessons. Binocular vision, which means it has eyes on the front of its head. It has good sense of smell. In fact, polar bears can smell baby seals from miles away. So it has good smell, hearing, it has sharp teeth and claws. These are all adaptations to allow it to be a predator. So these are some of the adaptations that a polar bear has. It has adaptations to survive the cold. It has thick fur, thick blubber, small ears to reduce heat loss, a high volume to surface area ratio, so it has a large volume compared to its surface area, and it has wide pores to stop it sinking in the snow. Adaptations that allow it to be a predator is that it has binocular vision, it has a good sense of smell, hearing, it has sharp teeth and claws. It is also camouflaged white so prey can't see it. Okay? These are all adaptations that allow it to be a predator. Right then, so that is the polar bear done. Our next organism that we need to think about, and I'm going to make the screen black. I do need to slightly edit the image while you're working. So our next one that we're going to do is a camel. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to put it in the center of the screen. So a camel lives in dry, warm areas with little water. So what I would like you to do now, I would like you to pause the video, please, and I would like you to use any research, write down in your book any notes that you can think of that help the camel to survive in hot conditions. So conditions that are very, very warm with very little water. Okay? I don't want you to worry about being a predator or a prey. I want you to focus on how it survives hot conditions. Pause the video now and we'll come get to we'll get back together in a moment and go through it. So you should have had a go at that now. You should have paused the video and used all your resources to help you do it, and we can go over how the camel survives in hot conditions. So first of all, I'm going to use this colour, I think. What does that look like? Yeah, we'll use that colour. In fact, no, I'm going to use this orangey colour. So the camels have thin fur, which allows them to lose heat easily, and they also have little fat. So they have no fat, which allows them to lose heat quite easily. They have these long, thin limbs. So long, thin limbs, which allow heat loss. Okay? They urinate very little. So camels urinate very little to conserve water. So they urinate little to conserve or save water. Because there's very little water about, camels can't urinate all of the time, otherwise they would lose all of the water they have in their body. Another one that we could also write down is that their urine is highly concentrated. So when they do urinate, it contains little water. So their urine is concentrated. Camels also have long eyelashes, which stop sand going in their eyes. Long eyelashes that stop sand going in their eyes. In their eyes. Help if I could spell eyes properly, wouldn't it? Stop sand going in their eyes. They've also got thick lips that allow them to bite into cactuses. So thick lips that allow them to bite cactuses. And we're going to go over the elephant in the room, which most people have as a misconception. They do have a hump on their back, but the hump contains fat, not water. It contains fat to give them energy when there's not much food around. So hump of fat for energy. So that's our camel. That's our camel. So you should have gotten written down that they have long eyelashes to stop sand going in their eyes, thick lips that allow them to bite a cactus, they have a hump of fat which stores energy, long thin limbs which allow heat loss, they urinate very little, which doesn't contain much water, and they have thin fur and little fat. So we now need to move on to our next one. So if we can refresh the screen, add our next image in that we can go over. Our next one is a cactus. Remember, plants are also living things, therefore they also have adaptations that allow them to survive. What I would like you to do is I would like you please to pause the video. I would like you to go and do some research using any means you can to find out how a cactus is adapted to live in its environment. I'm not going to tell you what a cactus's environment is like. I want you to do that yourself now, please. So pause the video, get a different coloured pen, and we'll go over the answers when you press resume. Lovely. So you should have now done some research on the cactuses and how they're adapted. So cactus live in warm, dry areas. Now, the first one, which is the one that everybody always writes down first, is the fact that cactuses have spikes. Now, their spikes would normally be leaves, but they've adapted their leaf to form a sort of spine shape. So, leaves form spines or spikes, which prevent the cactus from being eaten. So it prevents the cactus from being eaten by things like camels. Another adaptation that cactuses have is this green layer on the inside. If any of you have ever seen a cactus and you've put your fingers between the spikes and touched the green part, you'd note that it feels very, very waxy and thick. This prevents water from evaporating or transpirating from the surface of the plant. So we can say that thick, waxy layer prevents water from evaporating from the plant or from the cacti. So because water levels are very low in the desert, this prevents water from evaporating from the plant or from the cactus. They have this thick stem which stores water. So a thick stem that stores water. And they also have, which you can't see on this image, but I'm sure you found in your research, they have extensive roots. Extensive roots that go deep into the soil to get water. So these are some adaptations of a cactus that you should have written down. So let's have a go at the next one. We want our screen black, don't we? We want to insert our next image, number 4. This time we've got an owl. Now an owl is a very, very interesting one because they have lots of adaptations that allow them to survive. Okay? What I would like you to do is I would like you to pause the video. I'd like you to go away and do some research and have a look how an owl is adapted as a predator. I'm only interested in how it's adapted as a predator. So I'm going to write down here in orange, owls are predators. And I want you to research how they're adapted as a predator. So pause the video and have a go. So you should have paused the video and you should have had a go at these adaptations of an owl. We can now go over them. So if we go over the obvious, so they have sharp claws, and they have a sharp beak, that allow them to kill and eat their prey. Okay. Another one that is hopefully becoming obvious to you now is that they have binocular vision. Remember, in one of the earlier lessons, we said all predators have binocular vision. That means that their eyes are on the front of their head. Okay? Owls also have the ability to fly silently. Their feathers don't make any noise when they fly. Therefore, you can't hear an owl flying behind you. You'll only ever hear it land. So, for example, when you sit in your garden or you're at the park, if you hear racing pigeons fly past, you hear them go like that. You will not hear an owl do that. So, we can put that they fly silent due to light feathers. So they fly silent due to light feathers. Owls also have the ability to turn their head 360 degrees. So they can turn their head all the way around without moving their body. So they can move their head 360 degrees. If you go on YouTube, you can find lots of videos. There's lots of old memes that used to talk about rotating owls. If you go and have a look, you'll see those. You may have already seen them, I don't know. Another one that owls have that goes with their vision is that owls can lock their vision on an organism, on a prey, from miles away. So they can lock their vision on prey miles away. Finally, another adaptation that owls have is they have this dish-shaped face. Their face indents in the middle. Owls have ears, tiny ear holes on the edge of their dish. You can't see it when you look at them, but essentially their entire face is an ear. If you put your hands behind your ears and get someone to talk at you, it makes them sound louder, and that's exactly what happens with an owl. So they have a dish-shaped face, to improve hearing. Okay? So these are all adaptations that allow owls to be predators. So, you should have got all those down now. You may have had more, I don't know. However, those are the ones that I want you to write down. I hope you are marking these as we go, like you would do in a normal lesson. I've just made this lesson more so out of interest for you guys, so you get to see all the different sorts of organisms that we need to talk about. Our next one is a frog. So you're going to be thinking about how a frog is adapted to live in the areas that it lives. Frogs, make that box a bit better. Frogs are amphibians. They live in both water and on land. So just to help you with your work, you can put, we can say frogs live on land and water and are both predators and prey. Okay, so they are both a predator and a prey. So I'd like you to pause the video now and do some research as you have done with the other organisms. Pause the video, do some research, write down how this organism is adapted to live where it lives. Resume the video once you're ready to go over the answers. Okay, so you should have paused the video, you should have done some research. Let's go over this. So some of the more simpler ones we can talk about. They have webbed feet. Webbed feet for swimming. Okay. They have long legs to jump high. Long, strong legs that allow them to jump high. Frogs have a tongue to catch flies. So a sticky tongue that catches flies. They have this green camouflage body. Green camouflaged body, which stop them being seen by both their predators and their prey. And the interesting one with a toad or a frog is the fact that they have their eyes protruding from the top of their head. What this means is a toad or a frog can sit in water that's about that deep, so that would be the top of the water, that would be the bottom, and they can look around out the top of the water and see what's around them without bringing their body out. By doing this, they're less likely to be seen by their predator or their prey. So they have eyes on top of the head, eyes on top of their head to see outside of the water. Okay? So these are all adaptations that a frog or a toad has to live on land and water. Another one that you may have written down is that they can hold their breath for a long time. So hold breath for a long time. Right then, that brings us on to our final one. So if we reset the screen and we add our final imaging, our final image is a fairly popular one, but people don't realise how it's adapted. A Venus flytrap. Okay, a Venus flytrap. Now, Venus flytraps are found in South America, okay, and they're found in areas where the soil has very little nutrients inside of it. And let me just see if I can crop this down for you so that it's sort of edged properly. There we go. So I will add underneath at the bottom, as I have been doing, that Venus flytraps live in areas with low nutrients in the soil. So where they're found is in areas, it is in South America, where there are very little nutrients in the soil. And if you look at this image, it's captured a wasp and it's stuck so it can't get out. Pause the video now, go and see what research you can do, and then press play in a moment and we'll go over the answers. So, you should have gone and done some research on the Venus flytrap. So because there's low nutrients in the soil, Venus flytraps catch insects to get the nutrients, to kill the insect and get the nutrients from them. So we can say that they kill insects to get nutrients from them. Okay, because they can't get it from the soil. So if we have a look, they've got these spines that trap the insects. So these act like the bars in a jail cell, so the insect can't get out once the Venus flytrap closes. They have this inner part that smells sweet. So this smells sweet to insects. So what the insects do is they smell this sweet aroma and they fly and land on the Venus flytrap. On this part as well, there are tiny hairs that detect movement. Tiny hairs detect movement. When the insect lands on these tiny hairs and starts to move, this causes the Venus flytrap to close. When it closes, the insect is stuck and it can't fly away. What the plant then does is it releases digestive juices, that digest the insect for its nutrients. Okay? And the Venus flytrap then gets the nutrients that it needs. So, you should now be able to tell me what an adaptation is. You should be able to tell me how polar bears are adapted to live in the North Pole, and you should be able to evaluate how some organisms are adapted to live in their environment. So, I hope you've enjoyed that lesson. It's a bit different from what we normally should do. I hope you did it properly because it's just to give you some examples of how organisms are adapted, and I will see you in the next video.